So in my last video, I talked about confusion being one of the primary symptoms of unplugging from the matrix. And when you're creating your new life after realizing that you were probably just habitually acting and performing and just reacting to life the way you were programmed to react through your upbringing, parents, social beliefs, all of this stuff, right? You're like, wow, well, what do I want to create with purpose? And so you start getting confused. And in the awakening process, confusion is also a sign of childhood trauma. And that's why childhood trauma is so effective at keeping people enslaved. Because when you disrupt a child's ability to ground themselves in a safe family unit and in a safe environment, their personhood cannot develop. So instead of having our personhood being developed in the early 7 years, when that's disrupted, and then even if it's disrupted, in the early first 20 years, 25 years, there's no stable sense of self for someone to come back to. And we are rebuilding that when we are unplugging from the matrix, when we are in our awakening, because it's like this complete foundational shift that's happened in our psyche and the way that we relate to ourselves and how we relate to the world. And as you start coming into your self-sovereignty, you start realizing these patterns of self-abandonment, which were, you having to abandon yourself as a child because you needed to survive in the environment. So emotionally, you had to keep fracturing your mind to just keep surviving in that experience. So as adults, when we are awakening, we're pulling back these pieces of ourselves that we had to kind of store away for a while. And all of the compassion, all of the heart, all of the love to yourself and to everyone around you for having to also survive in that. This is a collective wounding. This lack of attachment, lack of security, lack of knowing who oneself is. Okay, that's the woundings of this world. Unless you were raised in, a secure, resourced family. However, a lot of us were not. And that also heightened our empathy and our compassion and our intuitive abilities. And we came here to learn self-sovereignty. And so we were put into those families, if you believe this, but you don't have to really root in that lesson. Vision really is the byproduct of trying to avoid your own truth. Because if you knew your truth, and you do, it's just buried. When we know our truth so deeply and so clearly, then there is no confusion. We get confused when we try to start compromising what our truth is in order to fit in the environment around us, or to maintain this relationship, or to maintain this job, or to maintain this friendship, or this housing situation, right? Because our sense of self was never developed properly. It was more so developed externally to the people around us instead of internally. And we weren't praised and witnessed and celebrated for our autonomy and individuality. So when we then start this awakening process to our own selves, and we start beginning to learn how to recenter ourselves in our own life, then we realize that confusion is because we keep abandoning ourselves. We want to compromise whatever this thing we feel is true for us in order to maintain this relationship. Because in our primal selves, human beings are created, we are designed to be herd mentality. We do survive in groups. And so whenever people are like, oh, you should just know it all, be enlightened, you don't need anyone, that's still toxic spirituality, because we are designed as human beings for interdependence, and we need one another. We have meaning and purpose by being in community and by having wholesome, nourishing relationships. And that's why trauma breaks us away from that, because trauma makes relationships very difficult and traumatic and tumultuous and dramatic, and perpetuates codependency, which is the compromising of the self in order to maintain those relationships. And so we're really here to come back to ourselves. But how do we do that when the people around us maybe aren't there yet. I mean, that's something you have to contend with, right? You have to start saying, am I willing to give up this piece of myself in order to maintain this relationship? Am I willing to not be seen in this relationship in order to continue living here or to continue in this job or whatever it might be? And maybe for a time you can hold that duality. You can hold that, yes, you need to stay for this moment in time, but you're going to hold your own truth. But we can't stay in that forever. And so then your answer then is to start building your way out over time. Like start making those small adjustments, maybe making a savings so that you can then scoot out. Keep looking for a job that's better aligned so that you can scoot out. You don't have to completely abandon that situation unless it's like super toxic and dangerous. Then I would, of course, try to get help to get out of it. But I'm also not giving you any advice. I'm not giving you mental health treatment or anything like that. Another reason this gets confusing is because we are battling the program that we've been instilled with since childhood. Have to, instead of learning how to just replicate what we were being told to believe and how we were told to act in the world, we now have to, by orienting to ourselves, we are responsible for how we act and behave and believe in the world. And that's hard to do when you never got the chance to do that, when you never were supported in that. And so your programming is to say, no, you got to do it this way. And because your survival depended on you being compliant to that thing, to those messages, to that authority figure, it's going to feel super dangerous and scary to start relying on your own inner truth. And that's why you can have someone like me, a guide who's already been through this, who's trained in it, who can help you through these symptoms of awakening, because it's so confusing in the moment and it's complex. One of the ways to reduce that confusion that you may be experiencing is to stop assessing your success and your well-being or worthiness as a human being, as a person, by whether or not you're making these external goals, and like whether your life looks good on paper. And so in scientific terms, we call this quantifiable or qualitative data. So quantifiable is like, well, there was 5 pigeons, or there was 20 pigeons in the study and 5 of them came down with this behavior, right? We can quantify it. We can put a number to it. So I could say, oh, well, I was a good person. I got my master's degree by the time I was 20 years old. I could be proud about that. My ego is satisfied by that. While I had 2 jobs and this and that, right? But then when I got to my later years and I was 32 and I was going through my entire awakening and I lost everything. And I chose to follow the path and it led me down some serious life lessons. That's why I can teach you guys this stuff, because I know it. I've been there, into the dark shadows of my mind and being. I had to stop as a perfectionist who would get my self-worth from high performance and being able to just push through really difficult situations because I could be adaptable. But then I realized that a lot of my identity relied on being adaptable, which means that you have to have something to adapt to. You have to have something difficult that you're experiencing. And as someone who now wants to just experience joy and ease and bliss and expansion, I don't want my reality to be based off of being a good survivor. I don't want to be adaptable. I just want to be expansive. And so I'm now creating a frequency and an identity that matches abundance and ease and being well resourced, instead of always needing something to fight against and to prove that I'm a survivor, which was all performance. I needed, because my sense of self was not based off of loving who I was regardless of what was happening, because I loved who I was. I only loved myself when I could perform at such a degree, when I could be up here and I could push through and I could see successes, but at the cost of my own well-being, at the cost of my emotional and physical dis-ease. So one of the ways that you can ground yourself during this process of new becoming is going to be writing out, what are your values, like yours truly. Get rid of everything else. If you were to go into your favorite space and you had everything you needed and you were taken care of and you were loved, and what do you really value? What do you really love? What do you really want to create in the world? And let that guide you, and put it somewhere important where you can just keep seeing it. And when you make decisions, bring it back to that. Bring it back and root yourself in those values and decisions and truths that are yours in your soul, okay? You're not compromising here. You're not, saying, well, in order to maintain my relationship over here, I'm going to say that my values are this, when it's really not that. Okay? And so a lot of this takes self-honesty, and honesty takes self-compassion.